now the women's here is dominating and the men still not. So a lot of America is just more, I think in my opinion, money ran, clubs trying to make as much as they can. You've got different levels of quality in a player's like age group, getting to know your players and allowing them to get better and allowing and see them get more comfortable, and maybe they get their first goal ever, and solution-based skills, or just having the soccer maturity that they probably should at the level of experience.
Good afternoon and welcome to the Reflective Coach podcast with me, Coach Luca. I hope you enjoyed last week's episode, which was a reflection point and a good opportunity to get into that mindset of looking at the reflections and the foundations upon which the podcast was built. However, this week we're back to the Coaching Insight series, and this week with a great upcoming young coach from the US, Serena Frank. I really love the authenticity of this podcast episode where Serena held the podcast because it was in the locker room, and I really loved what it was able to bring in terms of that just authentic style of working with players, going into the change rooms, the conversations that I had between players and coaches, players amongst themselves, the coaches, the kind of speeches which are given, the highs, the lows, the opportunity to set games up, coming back in from games, coming in from half time, and that locker room being the foundation of what is ahead of them. But this was a great conversation because Serena has a long way to go in her coaching journey. She is a young coach with many ideas, and I think she will go very far within the game itself. But within this episode, we talked about golden seed moments. We talked about evidencing the opportunity of following skill patterns and developments of players and their traits. We looked at squad sizes, ensuring how players get equal playing time, rotation, selection, making sure players enjoy the sessions, and that consideration of what they do on a coaching side to make those sessions really enjoyable and try to maximise every opportunity that every player that is in front of them. We talked about different skill levels of high school versus club, in terms of the also regulation and the regulated systems which are in place, and whether that needs to improve or there needs to be more consistency. What are the benefits of that regulated system and what are the benefits of not having one? So that was a really interesting consideration there. We talked about foundations in soccer, soccer maturity, getting to know your players, solution-based skills, changing mindset, implementation, and randomization, which I really like those two elements within themselves. But overall, we talked about high school coaching, coaching reputation, stigmas, flexible coaching, randomization, community, transitions from student to staff, reliability and values, and golden seed moments. Wow, there is so much within this episode with Coach Serena Frank. I truly enjoyed speaking to her, and she brought so much into this conversation that I can't wait to have another one with her again in the future so we can have that reflection point and then to follow up upon her work and what she's doing now to what it'll look like in a few years' time and have an even bigger learning frame for yourselves. But this is the Reflective Coach podcast. You can find it on YouTube, Spotify, Podcast Addict, Twitter, LinkedIn, TikTok, as well as Flickr. If you could drop a like, drop a follow, drop a subscribe, and leave a comment, especially amongst Spotify, YouTube, and Twitter, it does really help the podcast. As you can see on screen, I'm Anthony_Luca96. The podcast on Twitter is @TRC_podcast_. It is the Reflective Coach podcast everywhere else. Every time you drop that follow and that subscribe, as well as that like, it does really help the podcast, and it helps these guests become recognised even further to share their insights and experiences with yourselves, as well as the wider coaching world, the education world, and anyone else who is listening to the podcast, which we really do appreciate it. These guests deserve as much accolades as possible because they are so wonderful with so much to offer. This week's episode is Coach Serena Frank. I hope you enjoy it as much as I have. Continue to add to your coaching journal and your reflections, and continue to take away as much as possible. This is Luca on the Reflective Coach podcast. Thank you for your support and continue listening.
get people out of their shells, or we match them up with people that they normally wouldn't be put up with. And even putting up our most shy and less talkative players with our very out of pocket and loud loud players that we have, or maybe our funny players, maybe to help them feel more comfortable. And finally got it. I think it's my school email account.
That's right, no problems. We got there in the end, and it's nice to see you.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
That's right. I'm just going to say, how authentic is it to be recording in an actual locker room and making a podcast from where it all happens?
Never done it like this before.
No, nor have I. So, big kudos on filming it from the change room. I love that. Proper authenticity.
Thank you.
That's right. So, how's your day going so far? Okay, or?
It's going pretty good. Trying to enjoy my summer before school starts up again, and I'm busy with season.
And when does school start back up again for yourselves?
We start in late August, so
Right. That's not
got
too bad
about
then.
2 months. Yeah.
So, do you have anything planned in between, or is it hard to try and plan between being off and returning, or?
We are technically off, but we do our summer speed and strength camp training where we kind of just work on like mobility, agility, just strength and pure speed. We've done a couple soccer camps. Personally doing my own soccer camps with our local community, and just very, very small things, trying to keep it simple, but still busy.
Absolutely, and well, that's the life of a football coach or soccer coach, and those involved
All
in
year
sport.
round.
Constant, yeah.
All year round. So you get used to it. It's been like this for 20 plus years, so
So, how long
don't
have you
expect
been
anything
coaching?
to change. This will be my third year at the high school level. I've done a couple years doing club, but for the most part, just starting out.
So, still early days then, and a big commitment in the long term if you remain in coaching.
Yeah. Yep. Trying to keep on with it, I guess.
That's it, yeah. And coaching isn't the easiest of routes to go into. Especially how much is expected from us and other professionals in that sense. And it's some professionals can switch off at 5 o'clock, or we're still going on the training field, or we got players calling us, or we're trying to plan for tomorrow, or reflect on the day, and it's a never switching off world.
No, absolutely not. I feel most of my job is really just planning, admin, and having to communicate with players, and then also trying to just prep ahead, and watching film and trying to figure out what formations we need to have, and trying to analyze other teams and what we can do with that. So it's just nonstop, nonstop. I try not to look at my hourly wage because after that, I just know I'm in trouble.
That's it, yeah, and that's what we go into. It's not because of the wage or what we're earning. It's because we want to see players develop and give that commitment to them, and
Exactly.
and so on.
Exactly. Yeah. Pretty much me is just passion. I just have always enjoyed the game. It's one of the few things that I still really do enjoy in life and hasn't really grown out of the soccer loving phase. So I'm just glad I still get to be a part of it at a different aspect and a different perspective, which is still very hard in itself, but I will take it.
Absolutely, and when it comes down to it, then obviously you said you're doing a lot of operations, watching film, etc. So between it, that admin, that operations, and therefore watching film, you're mostly operations slash analyst in terms of what you do, and that. So is that what you want to be doing, like long term, or is it more on the grass, or more leading or planning? Would you like to move away from say operations and say more on the grass, for example?
Yeah, I mean, we're still part of the big grass aspect, and both me and the other coach watch a lot of film together. We kind of think the same type of mindset, so it makes it a lot easier on what our next step or plan of action is in regards to whoever we're playing against or what our players need. But yeah, hopefully I can be on the field more and it can just kind of be a little bit more free fluid, more of club style. High school is very analytical and a lot more planning involved. So club is definitely the move to go to someday.
And when it comes down to more analytical in terms of high school, why do you think that is then?
I think a lot more rides on high school aspect. I think a lot of the club perspectives have changed lately than when I was a kid. Back then, it was fun. It was, you're learning skills, you're learning passing patterns, you're learning how to move, the right way in a soccer game. In high school, you've got playoffs, you have something to win for, you've got a lot of school pride behind it. There's just feel like there's a lot more stress and responsibility in terms of your name being attached to a school where your friends and your teachers all work at and you go to, than in comparison to a club and you're with friends and you can kind of just enjoy and relax and there's not a lot of heavy pressure, I should say.
And I think that relates to, identity and that commitment of being proud of the school you're in because, I know someone and they question why I wear a sports top with my school logo on it still. I'm like, that's the school I went to. That's never gone away. I spent 7 years of my life there. It shaped me and I was proud to go there. And, that means you might not have been proud to have gone to your high school, for example. But for me, I'm still very proud. And, it's like that alumni and being part of a club or seeing the crest on like the tie when you wear it. It's just one of those
Yeah.
commitments when you have and identify with what you've been through and how it relates to you still.
Exactly, exactly. And I don't know if I ever felt that way with wearing my club practice gear or my club jersey. I want to look good in it, obviously, and represent it well. But I don't know if you would feel a personal tie and connection as the same as with the school, I should say. So I think that that's a little bit different. That a lot of people don't really consider, at least in the last decade.
And when you get high school, then obviously you get a lot of players and individuals that come through and they represent the school and they help build that school reputation over the years and represent the school. And then therefore the school becomes proud of going, right, we've produced, a LeBron James or Alex Morgan or, so on the list. And whilst it comes down to it, then that reputation builds over time. And those who come and go like yourself to be part of the coaching programs, you still achieve something, you still inherit that success but build on it by producing the next players. So whilst the high school produces that identity over that period of time, whilst you come in as a coach, what can you do and contribute in terms of that identity and what can you bring?
In terms of identity, I feel because where I work is where I went to high school at, and I, have a very strong tie to community and where I come from, and still wanting to build upon the program. But I think, like from a coaching perspective, seeing the team now accomplish things that my team didn't have the ability to do, or I was able to take that as further step, kind of just shows. I guess like where I want to grow as a coach and grow with my players. I think another aspect too that people don't consider is that there are relationships in the close communities where you have players that may have heard of you a long time ago and kind of forget who you were or what you were able to accomplish, and even just showing them, hey, I still got it type of thing, during practices or during a game or watching maybe like old film that comes up from huddle sometimes on a highlight. Just kind of shows like, hey, you're learning from somebody that used to do it too and used to do it just as good. So just being able to say that is fun and funny in a way.
And whilst you're an ex student and now you're coaching, and there's a lot within that because I can relate myself. It's great to be on the other side of it, on in terms of being staff and coaching and being able to build on those experiences in terms of that all round picture for you. But whilst you're as member of staff, you get to see the kids coming through and going, do you know what, that was me once, and I came through, and you get to see their behaviours and sort of relate to them at some point. And sometimes some of their behaviours and reactions and the things they do, you're like, yeah, I would have done that.
Yeah, I'm still kind of young, and I'm still, I'm Gen Z, coaching Gen Z. So a lot of stuff they do, I'm like, yeah, I would have done that like 3 years ago, honestly. So it's definitely a little bit weird having to divide, my personal and my coaching to, just like being a kid too, because I still consider myself as young. But yeah, it's definitely funny seeing some high schoolers pull some stuff, and you're just like, yeah, I was definitely there. I definitely did that. And it's hard to be like, well, I can't tell you otherwise, because like that's just that's a lot coming from me because I would have done the exact same thing. So, I just think that brings a lot of humor to the field and during practice and even outside of soccer aspect too.
Absolutely, and sometimes I've seen that, and I've walked around the corner, and suddenly I'm like, "Oh, I got to remember I'm a member of staff here. Or I might have to address their behaviours." And sometimes that's hard to sort of connect with and go, "Oh, I got to address this."
Yeah, yeah, it's definitely hard to tell them no and to call them out on it. It's just one of those things. I guess it's hard adjusting from the player to coaching and being responsible factors. So.
And whilst you could go to say five other high schools and you buy into their programs and you commit to their coaching staff, you represent the high school, you do your job and you do it well. You know, for you got that experience of where you've come through as a student. You get that buy-in a little bit more than you would to another high school. So you have those ingrained values, those ingrained expectations, the way things work, and if from a personal point, I felt it at times where if I felt that a student wasn't living up to the expectation that I felt as a student of the high school that I went to or the organisation, then I sort of pulled them up on it and going, do you know what the expectations are? And tried to pull them up a little bit more. Do you feel that from like a more personal perspective then compared to say if you were in another high school doing the job?
I think there's in Wimberley there's a very strong sense of community and responsibility and showing the Texan pride, which is a big slogan that we use here at our school. And so those values haven't changed. I think if I was at another high school and they had something else, it would still feel the same, but maybe just not as that personal passion that you get from being raised and growing your own values from that exact same value standpoint. So absolutely, there's a couple times where you've got to remind um, a player of what our values here that are my personal ones as a coach, and also the ones that we share at the school, which is very closely tied together. But yeah, there's been a couple times where you just kind of have to give them a little bit of reminder and say, "Hey, these are our values, these are expectations here. I hope you can meet them," because otherwise, it's not really tolerable. So there are some things that happen because they're high schoolers, and at every high school, it's going to be the same type of values that you got to explain. But yeah, Wimberley and our Texan pride, there's just no tolerance for anything other than that. So the red and blue runs deep here.
I love that, and that's brilliant, and it's true to you and that experience which you have, and you get to relate it to those kids and bring them through in terms of those expectations and what you've seen personally, and bring them through. So whilst you're back at your high school, and it's great to be somewhere where you're familiar, you know the staff, and facilities, and it might be close to say home or easy travel time, etc. But what drew you to sort of coaching at your high school then?
I kind of just fell into the position once I graduated from college. I was really just looking for a soccer coaching position. I was kind of late in terms of applying for positions at the time, and so I got really lucky just finding an assistant position here. So it wasn't necessarily that I had to come back to Wimberley. It just kind of the ducks fell in a row here. And honestly, like, I really enjoy it. It feels good to be back. It feels like home. It's easy to adapt just because this is all I've really ever known. So I have definitely enjoyed it. It just makes me a more passionate coach.
And whilst you've got those experiences, you're at the high school now, and there's a member of staff that I worked with at my previous high school when I was a member of staff, and he's probably towards his mid 50s, if not coming up, mid 40s, coming up late 40s. But he went to the same high school as me, so he was a student. I'm not in my mid 40s, by the way, and he went back as a member of staff. So all he's ever known is going to that school as a student, and now working as a member of staff. So he's never worked for any other organisation, never worked for any other school. So whilst you're in that sort of similar position, do you see yourself being there like 10 years and going, right, I need to sort of move on to experience other life? Or is there something where you're like, right, oh, maybe I don't want to make sure that I'm not there 30 years? Or is it just going for the foreseeable and seeing what happens?
I'm kind of just seeing what happens. Life, goes different directions. I don't know where I'm going to go just yet. Maybe 5 years, maybe 2 or 3 years, I have no idea. It feels really good being here and being home per se, but sometimes I do feel like, oh, you probably need to grow up and go to a different school so I can establish my own records and rankings and maybe a different legacy there.
I,
I don't
I,
want to. What were you gonna say?
I was just going to say, being a Gen Z individual and someone who's brought up in this generation, and whilst you do coaching and whilst the game is evolving and technology is evolving, do you feel like you either have the opportunity to enhance your coaching a little bit more because of the technologies available, or by looking into other technologies, or is it just looking at what you do on the grass and coaching and experiencing that over time, and if technologies come into play, or is it looking more like, right, how can I enhance and put technology in, for example?
I may be Gen Z, but I'm very old school. I like paper, I like pencil, I like the clipboard. The most technology I usually use is the magnets, which I don't think that's saying a lot, but it's more than paper. So, one of the technologies that we do implement, besides film and rewatching that, I think that's important. But we do use Game Tracker, which are these SBTs, the trackers that you put on players, and you can track how many times they get impacts, they get hit, their overall endurance, their speed. Um, it could be how many strides they have, what their work rate or their heart rate's at, or the work rate's at, which shows us how much of an impact they're making on the field. And it even is like the geothermal, where it tracks where that player has ran on the field, and we can see how out of position that they are as maybe like a right back ending up as a left wing in the middle of a game. So that's some technology I do think has been really cool to implement, and smart to include if you're coaching or your soccer team or just school can afford it. But what I always say is that if a player wants to question maybe our reasonings or why we think this way, we have foolproof evidence that shows us and them, hey, you're out of position and now your center back cannot pass you the ball. And they can be like, oh, hey, how did I get there? I'm like, yeah, you're actually in left wing right now. So that's one way we do that. We say like, hey, actually, this is what you're doing. Or we can say, hey, you're not working hard enough. It's showing your work rate is at 75% and it should be an 85 to 90. So that's another way we can look at it. And even dress concerns, maybe something's going on personally. We can say, hey, what's going on here? This is maybe 10% or a mile less than what you're normally doing. So it helps us check our players, helps us keep them honest and ourselves honest, and then even shows like how we can implement different practices or drills that fit the player's needs and not necessarily what we want. So that game tracker information alone just kind of shows us how we run our practices and what our players needs and what we think they need and how we can change. So it's a really weird piece of technology that seems really small but can be infected in a lot of different areas or categories in soccer.
And I think there's a couple of key points there. Obviously, finding your own way and what's true to you, and sometimes just sticking to maybe what old school methods are, or finding what works for you, is really beneficial. And it doesn't mean that you have to go and instill, AI technology, or you have to go and pull this in, or you have to implement this within your training sessions. It means, once you find a way, and maybe you might go, oh, right, I might use that over time, or I might pull that in, or that might just be a one-off. It doesn't mean that you have to consistently inherit in terms of what you're doing. It's also a fact that we don't want to over rely on technology or take away from what the game is. The game was played by 11v11 on the grass, and that's where it essentially starts from. So it's great that we have more technology. It's great that we can analyze, use video, etc. And it's great that we can get into little more details and we can do the video and replays, etc. But we don't want to become over reliant on it and take away from what is actually supposed to be on the grass.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it's good that you've got it for evidence as well, because sometimes I've gone into reviews with players and we've released them from professional clubs, and it's been difficult then, because then we've got sort of points that we might talk through on an IDP and being like, right, we're releasing you because of X, Y, and Z, but we might have had a parent or carer come in and question us and go, well, I've not seen that, and I've seen this differently, and this player's done that, whereas we haven't got the video to the levels that is being inherited in America. So therefore, that lack of evidence which we have kicks us in the teeth almost. So it's great that you've got that evidence, and I think for any coaches on the flip side of that perspective listening, I think just collating that evidence and opportunity to back up your point is really beneficial. So I think it's great that you got it, and it's great work what you're doing, and it's allowing you to grow as well, because you on the grass you're doing a bit of analysis, you're doing a bit of operational, you're instilling coaching methods, you're doing a framework. So I think it's a fantastic position that you've fallen into, and obviously learning so much within.
Yeah, absolutely. I do think, you say like at the end of the day, it's grass and 11v11. And I'm not a very tech savvy person. I try to keep our information pretty, dumbed down, basics, just easily understandable. And at the end of the day, the technology is always there, but that's only one aspect of soccer. And it's definitely not even, I would even say, 5% of the game. So just using something small and having it give an advantage to players that we have that are able to look at it should just be a small aspect into how we can improve soccer. But it's definitely not our whole coaching style, or we're definitely not some AI software team that that's pretty much just technology based. So
And I think it's good
at
because
the end of the day, it's not important.
exactly, and it's about fun and being on the pitch, and we can overanalyze, we can give all the details to the players, we can watch lots of video with them, we can do IDPs, we can do all of that. But at the end of the day, bottom line, and going back to the first and foremost point of playing football, is making sure that they enjoy it. And sometimes club and high school football is hard because they get scholarships, the expectations there, they have to do their academics, there's competitive games, there's that rotation, there's the size of the squads, and there's all the other external factors. So realistically, by just making sure they enjoy it, even a player who might be limited on game time, for them feeling a part of a squad and being out at the events or being part of the pitch or having the opportunity, that might last them a lifetime once high school has been gone and past and they're living, a different part of their life.
Yeah, I would say that the shift between high school and club has changed a lot recently. Um, Club, I think, in my opinion, has always been deemed more important than high school. And growing up, when you're paying thousands of dollars a season on a club team and your parents are driving you everywhere, especially if you're on a higher level, Premier League, ECNL, SCL, CCLEs, you're traveling 3 or 4 hours for games one way. And so there's been a lot of pressure for athletes to find club more important. And I've seen a big shift now where players actually think that high school is more important. And that could be playoffs, it could be coaches coming to the playoff games and scouting, and even just like parents' involvement in their students' like athletic performance now has been a big thing. But yeah, high school is considered always be the more fun, and you're with your friends that you go to school with, and you get to travel together. So in my opinion, I always considered it more fun than club. Club was always business, and high school was my downtime, kind of mess around, try some new tricks on the field. So it's been good to kind of see a new shift that high school is a little bit more important and serious, but also still keeping that fun mentality and kind of just finding a balance between both of them.
And I think that's interesting because I've spoken to a lot of American coaches who have sort of said the same thing, and they keep emphasising the point of club and the cost and pay to play programs. And it's quite eye opening once you continue to have those conversations with American coaches and understand more about the games and programs. But that thoughts and feelings around finding club more important than high school is quite one to consider and be aware of in terms of that shifting motivation, shifting patterns, and motivations of players to try and get into high schools then. But it's sometimes for that 3-4 hours travel for a game a single way, and as you say, thousands of pounds, that really then takes away from what the actual game is, and then it's difficult for that program then because there is a lot of money to commit, and therefore a lot of talent's being wasted in the US.
Yeah, and I could ramble on about this, but in Europe or really the UK, like I've heard like clubs, they're free and coaches enjoy it. It's all passion based, it's all passion ran. And it kind of just proves our American soccer and how like we're not always doing that great in comparison to a lot of the other men's teams here. And then you compare that to women's soccer, which started off as passion trying to get women into sports, and that's completely changed in the last 25 years, where now the women's here is dominating and the men is still not. So a lot of America is just more, I think, in my opinion, money ran, clubs trying to make as much as they can. Um, you've got different levels of quality in a player's like age group. So you could have a SEL to Premier to ECNL, and if you're willing to pay more, you can join the higher league and not necessarily have the skill to prove that. But the stigma with club and high school soccer now is high school's always been deemed as coaches that don't have experience. They're just doing a side hustle. You know, you've got teachers that are doing it for fun on the side. There's been a big shift where I'm seeing a lot more coaches at the high school level that have a lot more experience. They've played in college, they've played in the pros, they've been coaching for decades and they're still doing this, or they have a very extensive background and knowledge on the sport and just experience. And I would say back then it probably wasn't like that, but a lot more the last 10, 15 years, it's completely changed where you've got people that played college and high school coaches are still not being respected as knowing just as much as what a college coach might know. And it just, people choose to go to high school for a reason and people choose to go to college and coach for their own reason. So it kind of just depends. But yeah, there's a lot more experience in coaching now than there was back then. And so that's kind of why you're starting to see a big shift, and you see high school and college coaches arguing on what fundamentals are and who knows more, and what is deemed important. And that's usually like what the big gist is. But yeah, everything's always changing. So
And even though that shift is a good thing, and that's changing over time, and that perspective, that stigma, will be removed, and it's good, and it's, especially for yourself working in that industry and what you're contributing, you are, and as you say, that level of quality of coaches is actually higher than what may be perceived. But whilst that stigma's still there, and say that that there's that stigma attached, whereby others look at high school coaches not being at that standard, as you say, do you find that difficult then, by being a high school coach yourself and being on that side?
I would say in about Texas alone, there's only about 100 female coaches, and only one of those female coaches is the head coach of a boys program. So women in soccer world is not very common, and so there's one on that. I guess I just look so young, and I'm Gen Z, that when refs approach me, they're asking me where the coach is, or why the trainer is on the field in the middle of the game, or am I the manager or the videographer? Anything but a coach. But yeah, there is a big adjustment in just women being a coach alone, and then also having to prove yourself. Hey, I actually did play in college, or hey, yeah, like I was here last year. We met last year too, or just having to prove yourself. Hey, I actually know how to actually play soccer and what the words mean and the terms mean. So you're not the only one. But yeah, it definitely brings some funny humor along, and having to be like, hey, it says coach on the back of my shirt because that's what I am. But yeah, it is a big adjustment. It is a big shift, but I'm glad I've seen a lot more women gaining these coaching roles. So that's been really nice to see.
Well, a couple of compliments in there. Being part of that 100 club is fascinating and fantastic to be part of, as well as being mistaken for a player and still having the youthfulness to go with it. So definitely winning
Yeah,
there at life, I'd say.
enjoy now, I guess.
That's it. Yeah, that's it. So when it comes to club, and as you say, the more you pay, the more higher level you can go, regardless of the skill level. So that's quite hard then at club level in terms of that regulation, because money is winning over that regulation. So therefore, at
Absolutely.
high school, do you think the level of skill is higher than club, or will end up being higher than club as that result?
As of right now, I'm gonna say no, and that's usually just because you've got, well, it does depend on what school division you're in. I work at a 4A, and so we're usually dealing with multi-sport athletes that are athletic enough to, or they're coachable enough to gain some soccer skills and some soccer IQ and maturity of the game. It is rare, but there are a couple players that are just learning out how to play high school. Usually at club, you've been doing it your whole life, at least until you're at high school age. You've been doing it for at least a couple years. You've got the foundations down, basics. At the high school level, you might not receive that. If you're probably at like a 5A or a 6A school, you'll have high school teams that are more club-like, where you've got 13, 14 players that all have high level skills, and so you're kind of just working off of that, and you're not really having to teach them foundational type of stuff. So it does depend on what division you're at or where you're located at. Sometimes geographically that does play a big factor. But for the most part, right now, I would say club is definitely a higher level of quality playing. I do think some soccer teams for high school level are up at that level, but it's very rare. It's very few. You'll usually see them at state tournaments here.
And whilst you said you're going with the flow and seeing where things work out and go, for you, is it looking at lots of player development and working at those different levels of, say, high school and club and whatnot, and working with varied groups, or is it going right? I want to get to a really good performance group and high quality and instill this and instill that. So how will that shift over time? Do you think for you though?
At the terms of like high school level, usually you kind of get a good idea of what the player's already like within the first like 10 minutes of letting them play. Not even, honestly, you just need 3 minutes and you kind of already have a gist. Um, but for the most part, a lot of our players do lack a lot of, I would say, soccer maturity and intelligence. And so that's one of the first things that we work on in terms of foundations. I consider that being very important. It doesn't even have to deal with your touch or your shots or your passing accuracy. It just goes to actually understanding the game and being able to be an effective team player in a game scenario. Um, Club level, usually you're just tweaking a few things, like like getting your body over the ball when you take a shot, or following through on this aspect, or hey, like if you're shooting, you get a better angle on your left foot than you trying to force it on your right. And so club, you're just tweaking. High school is really just a lot of development, and very rarely at the high school level, if you're working with a larger school and you've got more experienced players, you might be tweaking in that aspect. But for the most part, it's a lot of just soccer maturity and intelligence. And COVID has some blame for that too, in my opinion.
Absolutely, I completely agree, and I'm seeing it in school myself every day as a teacher, and seeing that knock-on effect and how we're still being impacted by it. But after, say, it's 10 years and you've been coaching, you've gained, obviously a lot of experience and coached a lot of players and teams and so on. How would you want to be associated? Would you want to be associated as a coach for lots of player development, or associated as a coach for performance levels and, say, achievement and success in terms of, a lot of accolades and what you've been able to bring to high schools and teams, etc.?
I think, in like 5 to 10 years, at the end of the day, it's in my opinion, like reflecting on that would be just growth, and any growth is important, and not necessarily like accolades or creating a legacy, or just winning lots of games and getting to playoffs. It's all important. At the end of the day, that's what every coach wants, is to make it to that state tournament and maybe win a state title. But um, getting to know your players and allowing them to get better, and allowing and seeing them get more comfortable, and maybe they get their first goal ever, and they're barely starting out playing soccer. Right now, I think that is more important to me, is seeing players just succeed in the little things, and just in hopes that that totals up to everybody being collectively better, and maybe for one of those long-term type of goals. But definitely more of a teacher wanting to see the student and the player themselves individually get better, and fingers crossed that that just goes along for everybody else.
I love that, and I think that's great in terms of what you're doing and how to support the players, and really putting them first and the human element first. Because we can look at players, we can look at performance, and you say those accolades come over time, but we need to look at the person. And if there's a knock-on effect from COVID, then we have to really ensure that their confidence levels are still up there, how they're resilient. And I'm seeing a lot of lack of resilience and problem solving and critical thinking to be able to do things. Whereas the things that I might see and go, right, I don't know how to do it that way, but could I think of another way around it? I'm seeing a lot of young people right now struggle and go, oh yeah, it's not working that way, so I'm not doing it. And I think that's important on the football pitch. As much as we're on the side to coach and we can give a lot of instructions, and we're trying to react to situations as well and make sure that we're trying to mitigate circumstances for the player. The player must have 3 or 4 solutions in their locker to be able to go, right, I'm not going to go that way because the passing line is blocked, or the passing channel. Now I want to work backwards and work in, or I might shift into this little space every time, or I realise I could beat the run, or I could have that build up 1-2. So by equipping a player with a lot more by that soccer maturity, that soccer intelligence, you're allowing them to build on the foundations whereby if Coach Serena wasn't there, then they'd still be able to do it, and you could go, right, oh, that was good success. And realistically, do I need to be coaching you for 90 minutes for a game, or however many minutes, for example?
Yeah, I would say the last, we work with high schoolers, but I do have the ability to work with the middle schoolers as well. And so I kind of get a rough idea who's coming in and what we're having to deal with, and, some changes that might need to be tweaked. But yeah, I would say like socially, emotionally, a lot of the players that we have aren't able to create these problem and solution based skills, or just having the soccer maturity that they probably should at the level of experience or the age that they are. And so I do think like soccer IQ and maturity has taken a hard hit. But for the players that we have, like we do have a couple that are, really smart, understand the game really well, but just may not be able to effectively have the skills to do that. Or we might have players that have a lot of skills, but may not have that social or that soccer maturity of like, oh, hey, this is when I should be doing this. Oh, hey, this is when I should have let the ball go. Hey, this is when I should have taken my shot, or I should have found a slot ball, or, should have had a cross instead of dribbling through, an extra 7 players. But yeah, unfortunately, right now I do have to do a little bit more of coaching throughout the game. I hope that's one of the coaching styles that I can change eventually. But for the players that we have on the team, on our high school team right now, and kind of what their needs are, it makes them feel more comfortable if I am continuously saying, hey, that was good. Hey, this is what we're looking for. Hey, next time, did you see that person? And that goes with practice, games, watching film, just about everything. This generation really does need a lot of um, positive feedback, or just like reassurance in a way.
I completely agree, and I think that's great to give them that reassurance, because a lot of people are lacking that reassurance right now in terms of life, where they're going, and maybe questioning, their beliefs or their values or the pathway that they're on. And sometimes, as much as we're opening up more options and giving more opportunities, we're also then, making a mix up in their head, because they're like, right, I want to do this, and then suddenly something else comes along, and they're like, oh, I want to go and do this, and suddenly that reassurance can actually guide them where they need to go. And then if it doesn't work out for them, they go, do you know what, I might actually explore that now at a later date. So I think setting players up on a path to do something is good, but trying to make sure that they don't drift off from it too many times is really important as well, in terms of that academia as well, and that route.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we deal with well, I usually just deal with the girl side. And so that is one thing I'm having to adjust to, because when it comes to soccer, I just am going to play. And if I need to, in college, you just yell at somebody and nobody takes it, no harm, no foul type of thing. But, high school girls is completely different. I've had to change my coaching style just to, be a little bit more caring and reassuring and positive, and, the soccer guy mindset mentality that I might have on the field does not go with coaching girls soccer. So that's one big adjustment um, I've had to make. But as people get to know me, they know, I just get heated, or I just get too invested and involved in the game, and it's revert back to the old ways. But yeah, this last couple years, has really changed players' mentality. So it's interesting to see when that goes back to normal or back on the rise. But I'm waiting for that.
And I think it'll be good when you do get to that point and be able to then to reflect and see that journey and that contrast in terms of that player, that person, the way they commit, the way that they're fully invested, that identity they may have, that resilience, problem solving, all those core skills that they may develop over time, and start to look at the enhancement of those levels, and therefore how that might adapt your way of coaching teams, or adapt the way you might do skill sessions with them, or look at the management and so on. So it's going to be interesting the way you do that. So over that core of the season and the way that you're planning for games, you're instilling, sessions and so on. Do you then look at programming in, social skills or opportunities for players to make sure that they are doing things off the pitch, whereby they're doing problem solving and team building, for example?
Yep. I would say this season was pretty hard. We got a new coach, and so just trying to readjust, get him used to, how we usually do things in athletics and how our schools usually ran and what these girls have been used to the last 3+ years. That's been a hard adjustment. So we haven't been able to have anything that's been coach led in terms of like activities or bonding experiences that the girls can have. Our goal this year, though, is to really include more. Usually, when we have our away tournaments and the girls are away from home for a couple days, and we try to do laser tag with us and watch a scary movie together and allow them kind of just to hang out in the room. Go out to eat before games or after games. That usually does help with a lot of the bonding, but our goal is this year is to start in the fall and kind of do some team-led things, hanging out with coaches in a fun environment, so they can feel that they trust us and respect us a little bit more. But yeah, I would say that players bonding and their social skills with each other just help in general, not even from them being friends and there's no drama or issues, but even just knowing how your friend or your teammate is on the field. I know that as a wing that my forward wants to receive the ball on the run and I need to put that ball in front of her. Sometimes I think we forget that, hey, they might want it at their feet, in front of the defensive line, and that's not their style at all. So even just, them hanging out and them talking more and seeing each other in a more friendly atmosphere does play onto the field, and they can kind of get a better judge of each other, and in the end of the day they care more about each other on the field as well, and it's not so selfish type of mindset.
I think that's great, and I think sometimes we might look for a selfish player because we want him to be the leader, we want him to go in and get those tackles, we want him to get on the ball a bit more. But I think being selfless and being that community as you've built on and keep saying the high school's about, having that sense of coming together and being tight off the pitch, I think is really important, because the moment you're not tight off the pitch is suddenly then when the cracks can start to come in. And I've seen it in teams that I've had myself, and you see a good core of players who are really pally with each other, they're going out, they're invited over each other's houses, and then you see the ones who have either withdrawn or don't want to be part of that, and then therefore off the pitch we're not as tight, and it then creates a dynamic then where there might be a little divide, and you might see this group over with each other and this group has nothing to do with that. It's difficult then when it gets to that point.
Absolutely, yeah. We had an issue at my college where we kind of had like our cliques that was more based off of our grade level per se, and we kind of see it at the high school too. But in college, our idea was okay, like you've got one senior, one sophomore, one junior, one freshman, different positions, whatever the drill needed at the time. And so we kind of do it here too. We get to say, okay, like if you're going to do, let's say, warm up touches, it's got to be a new person every single day. So we try to implement things where we get people out of their shells, or we match them up with people that they normally wouldn't be put up with. And even putting up our most shy and less talkative players with our very out of pocket and loud players that we have, or maybe our funny players, maybe to help them feel more comfortable, and even just our leaders and trying to get them to ask them questions and trying to get to know them. And so we do try to do a lot of randomization in terms of our drills, who we let group up, who we let partner up. And so I noticed doing that, that really does help get players talking. And even after team dinners or whatever it might be, I might go in there and I'll ask, okay, hey, like we're all gonna ask so and so a question that you get to know about them. And so when the coach and the players get involved, it kind of just helps, like we're in this together, everybody's here, so am I, showing my face, and showing that I care. And so usually the players get comfortable very quickly after that.
I think that's good because by putting them together and having those dinners and getting together and doing those conversations, that means you can develop that quick. But I absolutely love that in terms of randomization because sometimes you think that coaching has to be right, bang, 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 detail, 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 minute by minute, second by second. But sometimes randomization can play a key part in terms of your coaching philosophy or your coaching plan because you might have a very structured coach, but you might go in as Coach Serena and go, right, randomization, and then suddenly you get more outcomes, and then you're going, right, they're socialized, they weren't originally speaking, they're now challenged against each other. We've worked out this player doesn't like going up against our player, we've worked out this player does. If they like going up against this player, then we need to challenge you and put them against someone else who might be more challenging. So actually, from randomization, you can actually see a lot of outcomes and a lot of an assessment, and actually build your sessions around them. But it could be a key part of your delivery, key part of sessions, key part of that philosophy.
Absolutely, yeah. We noticed last season that we had a player that wanted to say she was only ever a left back, didn't go up, was super shy. Was funny if you knew her at a more personal, private level, but never really got out of her shell. And so we put her with our loud group of girls for a couple drills. Later on, we found out that she was a better winger and could run for days. So I was like, oh, this is perfect. We would have never known that unless you had friends that got you out of your shell and say, hey, I can also do this position too. So it's interesting to see how just the littlest things can change a player and what they're able to offer you on the field and off the field as well.
And when it comes down to that randomization in your coaching journey so far, do you think that's something that you've naturally found, or is that something you've sort of pinched and looked at from other coaches and gone, do you know what, this might actually work for me?
When we first started doing that, we had a problem with our sophomores, and when I was a junior, and we kind of just had this underclassmen and upperclassmen, and no, I mean, we would talk and we were civilized and we were friendly with each other, but it wasn't that closeness that we had within our each um, groupings. And so, as a team, it was important to say, like, hey, how can we fix this? And it was saying, well, let's just not be with our friends. Like, easiest way. And so it's kind of nice as a team that we decided that, and we didn't really get that from the coach. Never gave us that solution per se. And so seeing how well that worked for us in college, I was lucky enough to say, hey, we're seeing this problem too. Let's just do this because it's worked for me in the past. Why not do it now? And so far, no problems. I'm going for it. We'll probably continue to use it. But yeah, it feels good, when it's player oriented solutions, and it's not deemed from the adult or the coach that brings those on too. So.
I love that, and I think that's great. And so, if I was to come into you and I was, say, a director of football, and I just wanted to sit down with yourself and work out maybe a methodology to doing things, or a framework, or maybe working out your approach to how you take things on, and I simply just sat down and I said the question to you: how do you win a game? What would your response be?
That's that's so open ended. I think it would depend if, let's say, this was like high school, my high school team. Um, Maybe I would say who we're playing against, what players do I have that are available, non-injured. See if we've matched them before. Probably do research before that. Do some Gen Z stalking, which has really worked out in my favor as a coach in terms of knowing technology. Um, and then even talking to players, seeing how they feel, what did they feel last time, because usually you're playing the same high school team two, possibly three or four times, depending if you go into playoffs or if you're doing tournaments. How did we feel last time? How did individual players feel against going the opposing players that they were probably matched up with on the field, getting their perspective, seeing what things can change. But yeah, just watching a lot of film. I don't know if I could give you a good answer to that one.
No, it's
There's
just
a lot of
no, it is a very open-ended question, and there's a lot of response
yeah.
which could be given into it. But I think looking at how you're thinking and how you may go right, oh, how do we respond to teams, or how do you feel? And I think those key questions coming out of going, how could we put this on the players to start to build on in terms of the environment, the approach, the match day management, the expectations beforehand. How do we take pressure off? How do we instill pressure? It's all those kind of things. And when it comes down to match day, then obviously we have this expectation where we do want to win. We want to try and push the players higher and build that self belief. And obviously football is there to win as a sport in itself. When it comes down to that match day, though, do you like to put pressure on players, or do you like to try and take it off them?
I think some situation, again, that's an open-ended question. Some games, there's just a lot more pressure riding on than others, where you probably feel a little bit more secure in the game going your way, and sometimes it's not. And I think those are just as stressful too. Just depends on what your team is capable of and what you know they're capable of going against the other team. Um, some games, I can tell that my players are nervous, and that shows me that they care and that they're passionate enough and that they want to win the game. And sometimes I think just luring and sitting in that nervousness doesn't actually help. So we've tried to implement some type of activity, whether it's like a team Jeopardy or guess the category, or even like charades, like right before we let them go, get ready for the game before we warm up. That kind of just helps take off pressure. Doesn't take away from the game, doesn't show that we don't care, but just doesn't let them sit and soak in that nervousness before we get to warm up, where they can just reevaluate and stay focused again. Other games, let's say we didn't have a good performance and we're really trying to improve our passing accuracy, or maybe just overall work rate, which has happened this last season. That might be a game where we got to put more pressure on as coaches and say, hey, we're tired of it. This is serious. This needs to improve, or we're going to need to reevaluate some things the following week. So it kind of just depends.
And I think, there's a lot within that and a lot of that you could take away and how you approach things. So when it comes down to each game then, do you set objectives for every game, or is it just seeing how the game plays out? How do you approach games in terms of that?
We have overall objectives, what we're trying to achieve in the game. Maybe something that we wanted to see improvement from the last time we played them, or maybe just from the last game in general. We'll try to set that, but usually it's nothing super concrete or specific. We'll readjust at halftime or in the middle of the game if necessary. But at the end of the day, the objective is to win, and as long as we're playing our game and not making too many mistakes, it should go our way. But other than that, kind of just roll with the dice, let them figure it out on the field.
I think I like that, and I think that's good because letting them figure out and problem solve, it develops those skills and allows them to critically analyze where they're at after on reflection. And whilst you're coaching, you might have, say, set principles. So you might want to be a very high attacking team with lots of pressing, and maintaining possession where you're hitting the ball wide and hitting early crosses. Now you might be struggling and the team are hitting you on a counter attack, and you might find yourself 3-1 down at half time. Do you stay true to your principles, or do you end up going right? I'm going to scrap these and readjust.
I would say my principles are just from my player mindset from the past. I'm very, very attacking oriented. Usually, will only ever play the top 6 or 7. Don't like to touch defense too much. If I need to, obviously, as a team player, I will, but that's just not where my mentality is. I enjoy running, and so that's kind of where I was able to find myself as a winger back in the day. But I think staying true to my principles, allowing the outside backs to pressure up with the wingers, or having playing like a diamond, in case we are attacking and we need to be a little bit more defensive. That works too. I probably would stay true to my principles just because that's just how I feel like you should have as your coaching style. If it's a close game, then my principles go out the window, and we're here to win, and whatever gets us that win is what's gonna work. But yeah, it could change. But I'm usually very attacking mindset and don't like to change that one too much.
I love that, and I think that's great, and it offers a lot for players to become involved because even if it's a defender hitting the channel or overlapping or getting inverted or trying to pick the ball up in our 1-2 or hit early crosses or try and break the lines, there's a lot which you can build up from that attacking sense and really offer those players. So when it comes down to it, what is your typical shape that you would tend to deploy as a coach?
Oh, that depends. Open ended. High school level, it really just depends on who is available, and as in like maybe somebody's at a basketball game and you can't have them for that game, and so you're stuck to filling in that hole if that's able to be filled, or you've got players injured and you're having to readjust. So it really just depends. It depends on who we're playing against. Maybe a 4-3-3 against a more like-minded team might work for us, or if it's somebody we've played before and we know they have a weak back line, we can set a little bit more pressure and have some through balls where we can beat them with speed. Or even if we know they have a weak right side and we're able to put our better two players on that side, it really just depends on who we're playing against, who we have, and I guess where the game is going after halftime. So again, always changing, always changing.
I think it would be impossible to coach against you at this rate. So, giving away no shape, giving away no real attacking playing principles as
No,
such, nothing. I love that.
I'm very flexible. I try to be, because you just can't be so one set minded in soccer. Everybody thinks differently and the game goes different ways, and so you kind of just need to adapt on your feet most of the time. But yeah, I mean, my favorite personally is a 4-3-3, maybe a 4-4-2. I played middle in college, and so having only two in the midfield is really tough, and you've got a lot of running. And I always got a soft spot when I see only one or two midfielders in that position. So I like to put three there just because I know it makes it easier for them. But really just changes. It can be a 5-3-2. Who knows? It could be anything.
And that's great because then the other team, again, over those periods of games where you might come up against them 4 times or they've come up against yourselves 4 times, by the third or fourth time, they're like, what? They've deployed 4 different formations.
Yeah, you don't know what we're going to come out with. We usually change it at that point, anyways. Or we like to just stick to, hey, they know what players we have, we know what they have, and kind of just gauge the matchup at the start of the game, and then see if we can switch it later on, whatever helps us out at the end.
And when it comes down to, say, that match room environment, that change room that you're in, how is there a way that you would like it to run, or do you let that be player led, or is it just see how the players go, get changed, and come in, give your team talk, and then do all your dynamics on the pitch, or is there a certain management of the changing room?
Usually, our routine is we'll talk to the girls, kind of what our objectives are. We might watch film before the game, kind of just give them a reminder, hey, these are what our goals are. This is how we did last time. This is what we think we should improve in. And obviously, we can't improve in everything, but one of those things at least needs to improve, whether it's individually or as a collective group. And every game is so different. We might be playing against a very, very tough team. With odds maybe not in our favor compared to a game where all the odds are in our favor. And so that's a pretty big adjustment sometimes in games. But usually we'll talk to them first. It could be 30 minutes to an hour. We'll allow them to come to the locker room. They can kind of talk with their peers, whether it's more fun or maybe what their own team goals is, which I think is really important when it's player led. Communications and what they want to see or their expectations are, and then we kind of just recollect, go to warm up, and then that's when everything's back to being focused and more coach oriented at that point.
And when a player leaves, then at the end of the game, do you try to give them a lot of reflections, or do you tend to just give them maybe 1 or 2 points at the end, and then try to let them move on, and then reapproach it then in training? How does that look for you at the end of the game?
It kind of depends on how the game went. The scores usually for a refing is rubbish. That's the best way I can put for that, is just rubbish. And so that's usually what I'm yelling about, and that does change some of the games, I guess, results in a way. I still am very petty about some situations that have happened in the past. Um, Personally, I like to keep it short, whether it's a win or a loss, they just want to get out of there. They want to go home. They're tired. It's 10 p.m. usually when we're done, and then recollect at the beginning of practice again. Sometimes it's more of like, hey, it's okay. It's more of like a quick cheering up session. We'll get back on it tomorrow. We'll talk some more tomorrow. But I would say my personal style is just to keep it short, just say what needs to be said. That gets us to the next point where we can really just break it down and have an actual conversation about what needs to be actually said.
And I think
And
that's
that can
good.
be positive and negative too.
Yeah, of course it is. And, sometimes we can overload players because we've given them all that information before a game, we've coached them, then we've readjusted the objectives at half time, then we're giving them takeaways to go upon, and then they're reflecting over it. So we might not have that contact with them later on in the evening or after a game, and then they're sort of stewing over it all night long. And that can be difficult then for a young person to regulate or manage or even reflect on without, a strong process or framework.
Yeah, and sometimes like if we find that if we're not able to have a conversation with everybody or let everybody know maybe how we feel after a game, we usually do send them like shoot them a text and say, hey, like we're really proud of you tonight. Like you did a lot of good things. We're gonna watch film. It's gonna showcase those good things that we saw that we are looking for. As a team, and we're going to use you as an example. And there's a lot of times too where we'll have players message us and be like, "What went wrong here? What did I do wrong?" And if they're texting and asking us, that kind of just shows that they care and that they want an answer. And so usually we'll respond back as positive as possible. But yeah, either they can wait or they can directly message or call us. So we like to keep it open, an open line of communication, and just tell them whatever they need to know because I'm personally very impatient. I don't like to wait. And so I don't expect them to wait for me. So.
And I think that's great because you're open and you're supportive for them, and especially if they're stewing over it or want that answer straight away. And I'm awful for it because I hate long responses, and that's difficult then because sometimes you might text someone straight away and you're like, now I've got to wait for a reply, and that's difficult. And for a young person who's reflecting and maybe situating a lot of thought over something, not having that reply can lead to then a lot of anxiety and maybe a lot of pressure on themselves. And sometimes just taking that away or going, yeah, just good game, that little thing can really make a lot of difference. And just putting that message out there can be key.
Yeah, probably the funniest thing we have on this team is that a lot of our players will message our group chat or message us personally and be like, "Hey, when is the film gonna be uploaded?" And we're like, "It's literally 1 o'clock in the morning. We just got back. It takes about 4 hours to upload onto Huddle for them to even see just the straight up draft, and then Huddle will do its other the Huddle assist where they'll re-edit it some more. But yeah, we have players that are right after the game, even if we win, lose, tie, whatever it is. Hey, is it uploaded? Can I see it now? Um, so it kind of just shows that they care and that they're even looking at it when they should be in bed or doing homework or whatever. So it is nice to see that it's not just us messaging them and supporting them. They're also being pretty proactive and seeing ways that they can improve or how they can do their part on the team.
And in response to that, then, what does reflection mean to you?
Very open ended. Reflection to me pretty just means, are we growing at the next time that I'm reflecting upon whatever it may be? It's got to be some type of improvement. There's got to be some type of positive change. And if there's not, then I've got to reflect and see what else can I do differently that's going to get me that improvement or that growth that I'm looking for. And that can be in different aspects, whether it's a new drill, maybe a different type of practice than we're used to, a game, even just conversations with players too. It really can be anything. So reflection, in my opinion, is just growth and change.
I love that, and I think that's great and very simple, and again, not overcomplicating things because we can overcomplicate things as individuals, as people, as humans, and especially as coaches. The more that we overanalyze things as well. So when it comes down to it, what are your values then that you try to instill within every session or team that you're going to coach?
Oh, values. I am not. movable. I will not change my values ever. That's just what I grew up on. It's what I've had some really good club coaches, and even my senior year high school coach taught me. But being coachable is extremely important. And if you are not coachable at a high level, you will be quickly removed from whatever that team may be. I've seen it at the pro level, so I know that that's true. But being coachable, being positive towards your teammates is super important. And it can be stern and positive, but it's got to be positive, and you've got to be able to get over it and accept it. And hardworking. And I think, and a lot ties into that. If you're hardworking, you've got good ethics, you're team oriented, you are selfless, and I think you've got a strong passion for the game. Those are just the big things that I think are super important and that everybody should instill in their values that they share with the team. So
I love that, and I think they're great values, and certainly ones to take away. And whilst you have values, do you think that they differentiate or they uphold non-negotiables in a separate sense?
some of them are non-negotiables. I would say like coachability is a non-negotiable, and being hardworking is a non-negotiable. But there's also a lot of times where those might fluctuate for different players. A new player might not have the same passion as somebody that's been playing for 10 years, and I don't expect that. But I do expect that their work ethic and that they should work hard if they want to be a part of this team, and a part of this team's successes and their failures. That's just what makes players grow. So some situations might change or have a flexible give on my values, I should say. But at the end of the day, everybody should just care and want to play soccer, want to be here, and want to get better. And those are kind of the big things that I think. If you want to
Absolutely.
keep that.
And Shen, I think it's great what you're doing and great how you bring that through and bring through that sense of identity, which is great. And you're working with young players and you're able now to communicate with them on the other side from being a student yourself. So if you were to look back and reflect, and this is something that I read upon the other day, and I was trying to reflect and actually think of the moment that actually happened to me. But do you remember a golden seed moment from a teacher or coach when they might have said something really good to you and that's resonated with you and sat with you ever since, and you might have realised that you're good at something and then come to that realization? Is there a time you can sort of look back and go, yeah, I remember that?
Yeah, I would say the one that really does stick out to me was when I was about 14, was in the middle school, eighth grade, and we were at a state tournament, and my club coach yelled at me and he said, "You need to use your left foot." And I was like, "Yeah, yes, sir. Like, this is what I need to do." I was playing on the right wing and I kept cutting in and trying to force it back to the right foot. That's just what I was dominant on. And, he told me, like, if you want to be better, you need to use both your feet and you need to listen to me. And I was like, you are absolutely right. I need to listen to you. You know more than I do. You've got more experience, and you played pro. So it's what can I argue? I'm 14, and you've played at Sunderland or whatever levels he had played on. And so after the game, I ended up scoring the winning goal with a left foot shot, and it just happened to curve right into the right corner. And so after that, it was a very much an "I told you so," and I was like, "You are right." It would kind of just what changed my mentality onto being coachable, and listening to somebody that has more experience was just. I was like, okay, this is what I need to do. This is what is important, and that's kind of what I think of today with my own players. Is I played a couple more years than you. I've been doing a lot more club type stuff, playing all year round for 20 years. And so it's just kind of like the same respect that I expect that my players to give me. So that's probably the one big moment that I was like, oh, you were right. This is a new value that I find important. So
And I love that, and I think that's good that you've had that moment and that experience, and you can certainly relate to it straight away. And whilst we're working with young players, and as I said, they might get to points within their lives where they've moved on past high school football and they're living different parts of their lives. Do you think it's then important to make sure that by the end of it, that they've received a golden seed moment off Coach Serena by the time they finish their program and time with you?
absolutely, and it doesn't need to necessarily come from me, but it does definitely need to be something, maybe soccer oriented. I would hate players leaving with regrets, and that's probably one of the hardest things. I don't think I've experienced that in soccer, but I've definitely experienced that in just life or academics or another sport. And I would hate for them to feel that exact same way about maybe the sport that they love the most or something that they care about a lot. So it doesn't have to necessarily come from me. I wouldn't expect that. I would try to give that, but as long as it's some type of takeaway that they can take, that's what's most important.
And I love that again because I was going to say to you in the next question or a lead up after that was, that golden seed moment might not come from you, but it might come from your, other assistant coach or the other coaching team or someone else on the academic staff somewhere, for example. And, as long as they've received some sort of golden moment by the end of it or realizing that they haven't had that, you can work hand in hand and play that off or not necessarily having a conversation and going, right, have you definitely given this child this golden moment? But you might just naturally give it and then boom, that might actually be the golden seed that they've taken away and really reflect upon or might take away in life because we might remember the most random little snippets throughout our life and sometimes we're sitting there reflecting on it and we're like, why do I have this little nugget of a flashback in my head when it has no real significance to where I am now in life? So just having that, might resonate for, 10, 20 years or right up until, the end moments of their life. So the impact that we're having as coaches can be lifelong.
Yeah, and I think sometimes too, if I'm so focused on a player's golden moment or golden goal, whatever it might be, it might take away from the rest of the team or maybe me trying to force something that's not genuine. And I wouldn't even know if that ends up being their golden moment. So, just playing the game, trying to stay like as authentic as I can is what's the best thing that's going to happen. And again, if it doesn't come from me, it doesn't come from me. Hopefully, it just comes from something else, whether it's the other coach, a player, or even just a moment of them on the field. That's all that really matters. But yes, it is surprising the amount of random little things that you remember from soccer at all different ages. And I know I've got a couple, but it is interesting to see or to think about what you keep in comparison to others.
And while we've been able to go through a journey and explore who you are and how you implement things and maybe how you approach certain elements or situations or games or that build up towards the season, build up to the game, supporting players, how that might look, that team dynamic, and there's so much which we cover, especially within the very short space and reality of how long you've been coaching compared to how long you could end up coaching for. And I think it's going to be great to see how much further that you take your coaching or how that continues to adapt over time. As you say, you're very flexible, and how that works out for Coach Serena and where you go in high school or club or trying to get up to say national levels or how it might play up or you end up in Europe or who knows. But as you say, it's going with the flow and seeing where that might end up for you, which it'd be great to see you do so well and apply everything great which you're doing now.
I can only hope so. Yeah, as long as I just keep, doing me, doing what I believe in, and changing to whatever is needed, whether it's the new generation that we live in or what players are on our team. It is consistently changing, and I've noticed trying to have one set plan and just one goal that I'm not willing to change doesn't really work out in the end. So just playing it by ear, and hopefully it goes my way.
Well, let's hope so. And well, it's been a fantastic episode. It's been great to speak to you, especially as we factor this into your working day. But before you go, I'm going to throw some quick fire questions at you, if that's okay.
Okay, all good.
Okay, fab. If you had to have someone describe you in 3 words, what 3 words would they be?
Passionate, dedicating, and man, you're getting me. I would say hardworking. That's 4 words, but one of those is together.
I love that. I was maybe thinking one that you might have related to being on the sideline and heated and getting in there, maybe. But they're
I'm
great words
bad.
as well.
I'm bad. My goal for coaching is to get a yellow card, but that hasn't gone my way.
I think that's a first as well, and I think that I'm definitely going to have you on that bit. My first for coaching is a yellow card. I love that. If you could move to any country to coach, where would it be?
Uh, and coach, probably I don't know. Maybe Scotland. We'll go with that.
Scotland. Why
So,
Scotland?
I've seen a lot of pictures and videos of it. I think it's beautiful. I have a lot of friends from Scotland, and they're all some pretty cool soccer dudes. So probably there. And they're all good. So I guess the soccer level's got to be pretty good there too.
Yeah, well, let's see what happens. I think the weather you might not resonate with for a long period of time, but Scotland would be a beautiful country to go to. I know I only live in Wales, but it's definitely a place that I want to end up getting to, even though it's not as far for me compared to yourself.
Yeah, it's a lot shorter distance.
If you could spend a day with any coach or manager, who would it be?
Oh, you're asking. Yeah, these are open-ended fire questions. But I'm gonna take my time and probably think about this. Uh, any level.
Any
This
level? Yeah, very open.
any level. I'm, I don't know actually on that one. I would probably pick a couple maybe Nadal or Michaels or I don't know. That's a tough one. Iniesta, Saki, probably a couple of those.
That's fine. Who was or is your role model?
My role model, I would say. I don't know. I don't usually like to pick a certain person because I don't. That's a lot of high expectations on myself. Um, yeah, actually, I don't think I have one.
Fair enough. That's a first, but
I can't be them, so I'm not gonna pretend to. So
Oh, that's a strong answer. I love that. Proper curveball in there.
yeah, I don't think I could pick one for you.
If you had the chance of being a full-time professional footballer or a full-time professional coach, which one would you pick?
Player for sure.
Yeah?
For sure. I would love to go back in a heartbeat. Maybe give my body like 4 years younger when I was, probably more my athletic prime, but I would totally go back and play in a heartbeat.
Well, you're still young enough, so who knows what could happen?
Yeah, who knows? I'm itching to go back every day. I usually try to practice with my girls just because I can get some touches on the ball. But yeah, I would go back.
Make the most of it because it might be one day when you can't get those touches or be as quick as them.
Exactly. Exactly.
If you had the choice of taking any job out there in the world, so it could be any coaching job or any club or national team or anything like that, what job would it be?
I would probably. Well, right now I would say I would go to Miami and maybe make some new formations with that MLS team, but I'm biased on that answer.
Miami sounds beautiful, definitely does. If you weren't coaching, what else would you be doing?
Probably teaching or playing. I'd probably go back to playing, find some mom leagues to join, and try to fit in with them.
If you weren't coaching soccer, what other sport would you be coaching?
Probably track or maybe basketball.
If you could coach any player in the world, what player would it be or who would it be?
Mm, that's a tough one. I can't coach professional. They know more than me. I don't know. That's a close one. Maybe myself. My younger self to my future self.
No, I love that. I think that's a great answer in itself. I love that. What is your biggest pet peeve?
In terms of soccer,
Anything. Could be personal, could be soccer. Your choice.
I would say when players question my coaching reasons without letting me give them an explanation.
I love that. What is your most favourite thing to do within your downtime?
I would say read or do one of my old little grandma hobbies like sew or embroider, something just different.
That's good. That's the first again. And what is one thing you enjoy most about coaching?
I think just being a part of the soccer atmosphere is still, I'm always grateful just to still be a part of just soccer, even if it's not me playing, but being a part of other players' soccer experiences and hopefully making it good.
Well, that's great, and it's good to hear all those answers, and certainly a lot of curveballs in there, and different expectations of answers, which is good, and it's great to have those different perspectives, and maybe answers which are not so common, which sometimes come back. But I appreciate you taking the time out, especially during your schedule and during your day, and I'm so glad you wanted to come on, and we could get this arranged really quickly, and I wish you the best of luck. But it's a big thanks from me, Serena.
Absolutely. Thank you. I appreciate joining on. This was fun. You got my gears going and now I'm already thinking about season and getting excited about soccer again, which is gonna, take away some of my vacation time for the summer, but that's totally good.
Oh, I love that, and well, thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.